morning and welcome to Rising. Happy almost Thanksgiving. Brianna has decided to start the holiday a bit early, so I'm joined today instead by Amisha Cross. Thanks for being with us.
Glad to be here. Super excited.
Great to have you with us. All right, well, let's get straight to the news. We actually do have some major breaking developments in the Middle East. Israel and Hamas have agreed to a temporary 4-day ceasefire and also a hostage swap deal. So 50 women and children hostages in Hamas custody will be released in exchange for 150 Palestinian women and people under the age of 18 that are currently held by the IDF. The U.S. believes that there are more children and women beyond the 50 that Hamas has identified for release.
Meanwhile, the Israel-Hamas truce is slated to begin at 10 a.m. local time this Thursday. An Israeli official told CNN hostages will reportedly be transferred between 10 a.m. until 4 p.m. Now there is an option for the pause in fighting to last as long as 10 days, but Israeli officials believe that seems unlikely. Prime Minister Netanyahu has said for every additional 10 hostages who are released, there will be an additional day of a pause in the fighting. Well,
now, per reporting in Politico, some Biden administration officials are quietly celebrating the temporary ceasefire agreement as proof that the president's Middle East strategy is actually working. But others are pumping the brakes on that idea that it's vindication, one of the officials told Politico shortly before the deal was finalized. There's more to do. Joining us now to discuss everything going on is retired Lieutenant Colonel at Defense Priorities and host of Daniel Davis Deep Dive on YouTube. Daniel Davis, so great to have you with us.
Thanks, Robbie. Always good to be here.
All right, so what do you make of this ceasefire? Obviously, there have been ceasefires in the past between Israel and Hamas that have ended rather swiftly. Some would argue they were in a state of ceasefire when October 7th began. So how excited should we be that, I mean, obviously, at least there's a pause to the really horrific images coming out of Gaza, but what should we expect?
Well, the Israeli government is very explicit in saying this is not a ceasefire. This is just a humanitarian pause and a cessation of fighting expressly to give a safe passage for hostages to be exchanged. And they, Netanyahu was emphatic when he announced this, that this does not mean the war is over. We're going to continue fighting. We're going to continue waging this war until we have completely destroyed Hamas. So they have no intention of slowing down.
Lieutenant Colonel, do you believe that this is strategically a wise decision? Is Hamas going to ratchet up its fighting power before the pause starts? What do you see as some of the ways that this could possibly only make things more tough going forward?
Yeah, I don't think it's going to make things more tough. I hear a lot of people talking about that. And in fact, there was apparently a lot of debate within the Israeli war government to whether or not they should do this. I believe Benny Gantz was completely against it at first, and then finally came around to it, claiming initially that this would be a benefit to Hamas. Look, the balance of power is so dramatically out of balance in the favor of Israel that a pause like this won't have any impact at all on the outcome of the war, because Hamas is hermetically sealed in there. They can't get any more supplies for their war effort. They can't get any reinforcements. They can't get medical support for their wounded soldiers. I mean, they got nothing, and this is not going to change that. It's also an opportunity for the Israeli Defense Forces to consolidate their positions, to get their stuff in order, to get more supplies front-loaded for theirs. I mean, I could just tell you from my personal combat experience that sometimes these pauses are very useful to us to get ready for the next phase, and there will definitely be a next phase.
So obviously, here in the U.S. context, President Biden's support for Israel, ironclad support, we offer them, we give them so much money, and he's maybe quietly kind of tried to leverage Netanyahu and the Israeli government to concentrate on killing fewer civilian hostages. But of course, we see the images coming out, the 10, 11, 12, 13,000 dead. It's having an effect on Biden's approval in the Democratic Party, particularly among young Democrats who are very skeptical of the war effort and think perhaps the cost cannot be borne compared to what's being accomplished. And also, I think, for those of us who remember how Afghanistan and Iraq and Libya went down, there's some question about, is Israel trying to accomplish regime change here? I fully accept that in an ideal world, Hamas not being in charge of the Gaza Strip anymore would be best for everyone, both Palestinians and Israelis. But are so many people going to die in pursuit of this goal that it actually emboldens more terrorist activity, not just against Israel, but theoretically the United States?
Yeah, Robbie, I think you're dead on. That's exactly the issue. One of the big things I'm most concerned about is that in their understandable anger to get retribution and justice for the Israeli civilians that were murdered on the 10th on October the 7th, is that they go too far and that they get too emotional, that they actually don't even care how many Palestinian civilians are killed in the process of going after Hamas. And you just can't do that, because that could not only undercut the Western support for Israel, which it's already starting to fray some pretty significant deterioration throughout the Western world, certainly not just the United States, and it's being more and more sustained. It's also exacerbating the anger within the Arab world. And we see that there's more and more pressure from Hezbollah to enter into the war. They've actually increased in the last few days their attacks into Israel. You have Yemen now coming in trying to take some of the ships that are in the sea and that, to go against Israel. They fired some missiles into it. American troops have been under attack from Iran-based groups, Kataib Hezbollah and some others in both Iraq and in Syria. And all of those things continue to exacerbate this. And they're all primarily focused on the fact that too many Palestinian people are getting killed. And we're talking thousands upon thousands. It's not just a few. It's an egregious number. And they haven't even gotten into the more populated areas of the South yet. So that number could spike even higher. And it's very uncertain how what the results could be. But I think that it would be bad both for Israel and definitely for the United States and the region.
Right, and because frankly, it doesn't feel like that they're close to accomplishing the goal of rooting out Hamas, if that's what they're trying to do. They fired on hospitals and schools and other things, saying that those are, Hamas is there and they're keeping hostages and that sort of thing. And I think, you can accept that and still say, but they haven't captured, they've killed certainly numbers of members of Hamas, but there's a lot more still to go. Like, they're not even close to the project if what they're really trying to do is wipe out that group entirely. And there are going to be a lot more civilian casualties to come. And it doesn't seem like there's enough U.S. Willingness to go along with that.
Yeah, and I think that, the more this goes, I mean, it's not just the political damage this is doing to President Biden or the Democratic Party, but it's the entire Western support. Because, man, these images coming out of al-Shifa Hospital where you had, all these little infant babies that were prematurely born that had to be evacuated to Egypt because the hospitals had been made inoperable. And of course, you see entire city blocks being leveled to the ground. I mean, that doesn't look surgical to me. That doesn't look, proportional to many regular people. They're saying, hey, I get it that what Hamas did was horrific and should be punished. But this seems like collective punishment for the Palestinian people, not just Hamas. And the farther this goes, the more the support's going to be undercut. And I'm telling you, it could also finally put enough pressure on maybe Hezbollah to attack in from the north. We don't know, but I know that there's a lot of pressure for that. And this just is going to go the wrong way. And just from the morality of it, I can just say that I think that we need to put more pressure on the Israeli government to not do the things that we tell other regimes around the world not to do, so for our own moral support.
Lieutenant Colonel, as we wrap this up, I really wanted to delve into whether or not you think it's actually possible to root out Hamas. Because on the one hand, obviously, it's a terrorist organization. It also is an ideology. When we are speaking towards and looking towards military interventions for terrorist organizations, it's not like fighting your average military group or your nation state. This is entirely different. The United States didn't technically root out al-Qaeda. We've been trying to root out terrorist organizations for a long time, and that has not been effective. Yep. At what point and how does that leverage actually look? And is this a possible winnable goal?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And you don't have to look very far to see our own experience, not just with al-Qaeda, but with the Taliban. We kept saying, for year after year after year, we just need to put a little bit more pressure. We need a little bit more troops. We need to kill a little bit more of them, and then they'll see the light. And of course, they never saw the light. Not only did it not succeed, every year the number of Taliban increased and the terrorist threat continued to increase until we finally withdrew. And only then did the threat to our troops go down, because now we're not there to be attacked anymore. And, we're still able to keep ourselves safe even without troops there, as an aside. But the bigger issue, and much bigger here in the Gaza Strip, is that the more Palestinian people that you kill, the more people that you're going to gain against Israel. If people thought that the Palestinians had a lot of hatred for Israel before this, just imagine when half of their city has been wiped out and tens of thousands of people have been killed and wounded. I mean, however many Hamas people you take, there's going to be someone else to rise up and want to resist, this occupation, and now then this destruction of their way of life. So this is not going to help Israel. I've been saying, I'll just finish with this, that Netanyahu's objective is to bring peace to Israel by destroying Hamas. This is almost surely going to take more peace away from Israel, because there's no aftermath short of annihilating all the Palestinian people.
Terrible to contemplate. Lieutenant Colonel, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.